Hello and welcome to Extreme Perspectives. This is a monthly podcast created by the Sense Network to bring you conversations with people who see things differently and think differently. This podcast is for people who want to expand their mind and develop their creative intelligence. I'm your host, Jeremy Brown. For 20 years, I've been seeking out people from the edges of culture, the creators, outliers, misfits, rebels, and the crazy ones. People who want to change things and push the human race forward. In this episode of Extreme Perspectives, I speak with the crazy one, science teacher and creative thinking world champion, Emily Dixon. At her school, Emily is known as the crazy one, the teacher who every time the fire alarm sounds, the student thinks she set it off. Her love of science drives Emily to organise the most off-the-wall after-school clubs. These instill an experimental mindset in her students, who she thinks are missing out on the arts. Sit down, ears open, and expand your mind to understand more about why schools are a mindset and not just a building. Hello, Emily.
Hello, Jeremy.
How are you today?
I'm doing brilliant, thank you. How are you?
Excellent. It's been a bit of a busy day, but you know what? It's always so nice to speak to somebody friendly and have a conversation like this. Despite everything that's happened before this is the good bit. This is what it's all about. Meeting new people, having a good chat.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to speaking to you. It's nice to have a good conversation about whatever we end up talking about. Lots of interesting things, I'm sure.
I'm sure. But as you know, we always start with the same question. So before you introduce yourself, I have to ask, are you an outlier, a misfit, a rebel, or a crazy one?
I'm a crazy one. Although I think there's an element of all of those things you've said to me. I think I quite enjoy being the crazy one, the one where people are thinking, what on earth is she doing and what's going on? Because the one thing I think is there are people in my life whose opinions matter to me, but that's not everybody out there. And if they're looking at me thinking she's doing something crazy, I think at least 50% of those people are thinking, but I wish I was doing what she was doing.
Thank you so much for joining us. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that you've been on throughout your life, your creative journey throughout your life so far.
Yes, of course. So I had a fantastic childhood. I'm very, very lucky. I've got loving parents, grandparents, a brother. Then amazingly, we get on really well, even though siblings sometimes squabble. So I was very fortunate that everyone around me always encouraged me to be whoever I wanted to be and to explore lots of different options. So I went into a single-sex senior school where, again, I was encouraged to do whatever I liked. And I was very interested in sciences. I was also interested in languages and mathematics and sort of design and technology. Decided to go to university and was very stuck between physics and engineering. Decided to do physics and maths in the end, and I remember turning up at university and seeing that I was one of very few girls there, and that was a complete 180 from what I was used to. After about 3 weeks, I was the only girl left on the course, so it was just me and a load of boys, which was a bit tricky. And then got my degree, and I'd spent quite a long time with a lot of people around me saying, you'd make a really good teacher, you'd be a really good teacher. Me going, no, I don't think I would. And then I gave it a go and I absolutely love it. So I've been teaching now, oh my goodness, for about a decade, just over. So it's about a decade since I qualified. I've been at the same school for 9 years and I absolutely adore it. I get to teach physics in the senior school, science to junior school students in a science lab, which is amazing. Some of them have not seen sort of full-scale science equipment before. So it's so exciting. And the school allows me to explore my creativity in organising house events. I've run creative thinking. I run lots of different school clubs, from education-based one like science club to Pokemon, craft club, and absolutely anything you can think of. So I'm very, very fortunate that I get the support at work and I get the support out of it, and everyone's been fantastic. And this year just got married to my now husband Mike, so that was probably the big event of the year for me, and looking forward to going off on honeymoon soon.
Getting married, I thought you might have said the new accolade of being the new world champion for the Mind Sports Olympiads. That was quite remarkable. You're the reigning champion creative thinker. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So I've been competing it's been 10 years since I first competed, and I've done it 8 times because we had a couple of years for COVID off. So I absolutely love it. I got introduced to the MSO by my now husband. I said, "Oh, this creative thinking, what is it?" He said, "I don't know much about it, but I think you'd enjoy it." I tried it, met the lovely Bill Hartston, who was fantastic. Didn't do particularly well in my first year, but it was just an amazing chance to answer a question literally however you want to do it. And then every year I've been going back, competing and trying to get better. I've had tie broken out of the gold. I've had a close second place finish and that sort of thing. You know, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. And then ironically, in the year where I was a bride, I then succeeded and was able to win the gold medal this year after 8 tries. And I was absolutely delighted.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you remember what any of the questions were this year?
I do. I remember my favourite one was about toes, of all things. It was along the lines of something along the lines that humans have 5 toes on each foot. Explain why, and give the advantages and disadvantages of having 4 or 6 toes, and also suggest the ideal number of toes. So I started, here's some advantages, disadvantages, gave some, ideas for toes and counting them, interlocking toes and things like that. And then had the thought of what if the toes aren't on your feet? So I started adding toes into your tongue, where you could lift up the little toe, paint the nail with reflective nail polish and use it at the dentist so they could see the back of your teeth. And toes on your head holding your hair back. It just sort of, I got that moment where I was like, I'm being crazy right now, but I'm just going to go with it. And I absolutely enjoyed it. And the more and more I was looking at the question, the more I loved it and the more I enjoyed writing it.
Brilliant. I wish I could have read your entire response, because I actually love the way that Bill, who not only sets the questions, but also judges in the broadest possible term, gives you a little bit of a feedback about what he liked about the ideas as well. I do like his summing up that comes back. It's always good to see how he's interpreted them and why he's enjoyed them.
Oh, absolutely. I love listening to that, and sort of after you've done a round, that little chat you have when you go outside the room for a little break and everyone says, "Oh, what did you put? What did you put?" It's just an absolute melting pot of ideas. It's fantastic, just the different lines everybody went down. And so hearing that from everyone and hearing Bill's summary of it all just makes it even more fascinating.
Now, I have to ask, how much of this do you then transpose to the classroom?
I'd say as much as possible. I try to be, I sort of say to the students that if you don't understand something, I want to try and explain it in a way that you will. And sometimes I give the warning to the students of, this is going to sound really strange, but bear with me. And that happens quite a lot. So there's some examples where I'm trying to explain pressure to students about particles colliding with the container wall or something like that. And I'll talk to them about a pen of sheep. And I'll talk about, well, if you gave the sheep more energy, let's feed them a Red Bull, what's going to happen? Oh, they run faster. And now they collide with the walls more often. And it's me trying to describe pressure to them in the maddest of ways. But I have actually had students come back to me and say, "Miss, I remembered the sheep. And all the other teachers are going, "What was the sheep? How was that?" But it makes sense. So it doesn't work for everyone, but hopefully there's a few students out there that get something out of the craziness.
Now, this might be quite a controversial question to be asking so early on in our conversation, and you may say, "I'm not prepared to answer that, not on a recording." But what would you say is currently wrong with the education system, or how it's sort of formally and conventionally sort of thought about? Because I'm quite into this. I better just let you know that right now. But I'd love to hear your opinion. That if you were changing things, what would you change?
Gosh, I think that's a huge question. There's quite a lot that I think needs tweaking. I think if I try and think of the thing that's been the most current or the most recent sort of bugbear of mine is with the whole aspect of COVID impacting education. I think there's a lot of talk about lost learning. There's a lot of talk about what went missing, but part of me wants to say actually teachers need to be highlighted because we didn't sit and do nothing during all that time. We're not amazing NHS workers going out and risking our lives, but we were still working during it. And actually, the biggest thing for me isn't the loss of learning for the students, because that can be made up and in lockdown. It's the loss of social aspect of it. And I think there's been quite a lot of focus in the news and government about the learning that's lost, but students actually not getting time to sit and play with their friends or sit and talk to their friends is, I think, the biggest thing that they've suffered about. And it's that idea that education isn't just about in the classroom learning, it's about the bonding with friends, it's about those after school clubs, it's about competing in house activities. That to me was the biggest loss that we had during COVID that isn't as appreciated as it should be.
I would agree with you. In fact, I experienced that firsthand with my eldest daughter, that was her sixth form year, and this was the year that they, should have been spending summer afternoons when they're supposed to be playing sport, sort of sitting around in the sun. I was going to say smoking cigarettes, but that might have been me. But they did miss all that social time, and that's the biggest scar that it's left, I think, from that whole period. It was that socializing and the end of term after the exams when they were finished. That's the bit that they were almost spending their entire, through all those years of schooling, the bit that they were most going to look forward to, because that was the moment that they were sort of released. So I completely understand that sentiment.
Sorry, I actually say that to my students. I say year 11 is rubbish, year 13 is rubbish, because you've got to work really, really hard. You're going to get tired, but you're going to get a massive holiday at the end of it. So yeah, I did feel a little bit of that. Oh gosh, I hope they're not remembering that when they're missing their break. But I see it from a teaching aspect. But I suppose, how did you find it as a parent, if you don't mind me asking? Like, how did you sort of deal with, having to say, actually, you can't go and do these things? Was it difficult, or were you able to bond with other parents over it?
I think I was a little bit more stoical about it, sort of, and if anything, it was one of those lessons, a little bit like having a flight cancelled when you're at the airport, or some, things that are out of your control, and you can't sweat them, you can't let them, sometimes you just have to sort of breathe through it and let that one go, and sort of say, look, things like this happen in life. Now that was a very big one, because it was for such a long period of time, and with maybe a daughter with not more experience, that's a big thing. That's a really big thing that you were looking forward to and you didn't get. But I tried to turn it more into just a lesson for life when things don't always work out. And I said, there will be other there will be other kind of moments where you will experience that. And sometimes, when you have been deprived of something, it actually, something else could happen later in life where it completely has prepared you for it. So you can look back and actually say that was so you see, I tried to, she's now studying philosophy, so I'm sure that she's going to find some wisdom in that experience somewhere. But I know other people found that much harder. But yeah, I try not to complain too much about circumstances out of my control. That was the lesson that I tried to pass on, and there will be other things. So yeah,
it's you can't deal with everything going on around you, but you can deal with how you react to it. So
yes, and I think that's what it is. So if in our work we talk about reframing things, and that's what you're trying to do. What have you been afforded by not doing that? Oh, you get to spend more time with me.
Yeah. Or for me, my form get to spend more time being sent silly tasks rather than homework. Things like, I sent them a video of a theme park that had used their rapids ride because they were closed. They'd inflated 3 giant ducks, put them in the rapids, and they were like, off they go, which one do you think is going to win? And that was what I talked to my form about. So actually, as much as there was, sad parts, just trying to make them smile was actually a really nice part, thinking, this is my job, I get to make them smile and feel good about themselves. So yes, silver linings are in there somewhere.
Well, there you go again, another great sort of different way of engaging your class. So do you have a form class and you're with the form class, or do you have many different classes that you're teaching?
I have many different classes. So I have a form group. So we meet in the mornings for form time, which at the moment is a year 9 group. I've had them for this is my second year with them, and I'll get to keep them all the way through till they leave, at sixth form, which is nice. But I teach at the moment. I teach anywhere from year 4 up to year 11, but I have taught A level in last year and in previous years as well.
Do you have a reputation in the staff room as being the crazy one, or have other people adopted your methods? Is anyone else catching on to your approach?
I believe so, yes. I definitely started as sort of the crazy one, and then just little things where the more and more comfortable I got being myself at work, I started wearing sort of very brightly print dresses, and so the students started noticing, the staff started noticing, a couple of other staff have started doing that as well, and then I was given a buddy at school. This was during sort of the COVID time when we were in and out, and we got on like a house on fire. I was so grateful. She's such a close friend to me now, and she's kind of, I think, adopted that, right, let's get out this flame testing and let's do this really cool experiment as well. And then they've just given me another buddy, so I mustn't have done too bad a job, and she's brilliant as well. And so I say to the kids, like, on a Monday morning when they're all half asleep, they must be absolutely sick of the two of us because we're so energetic and bubbly, like, right, we're going to do this. And I said some days they must want us to come in tired because we're both so like that and so out of the box that I love it, but it means I've got a good variety of staff around me. But you've also got the other kind of staff. So in my department, if a student doesn't like, me explaining pressure with sheep, I tell them to go to my head of department, who will give them a much more sort of physics explanation rather than a strange example like that. So we're a good team.
You've had complaints about your slightly unorthodox teaching style.
Not many students. I have had a couple that said I'm not quite sure what she meant by that. Yes, but I think the main complaint I get at school from my reputation is whenever the fire alarm goes off, at least one student says, "Miss, was that you?" It's never been me, just for the record, but I get asked quite a lot if that was my fault.
Oh, that's quite a good reputation to have. So what I'd be intrigued to understand, if you were to reflect on your approach, what are some of the lessons that the other teachers might be taking away from you? Are you getting better engagement? Well, I think it is Sir Ken Robinson, I think, in his TED Talk, or any of his stuff, he does talk about the importance of having fun, doesn't he? And sort of playing with things. Yep. And that's, and that for me, it's like learning to play with words, learning to play with numbers, learning to play with music, rather than learning scales, rather than learning this, you've got to have a little bit of fun because, but anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to answer the question. I wanted to show some of my enthusiasm for this, and I'd be hungry to learn a little bit more.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I absolutely love experiments. It's my favourite thing. I have a science lab. We have several science labs. I have one where I'm based a lot of the time, and we take students as young as year 4 over to that science lab. So they're really small behind the desks, which is very sweet, but they are allowed to use, obviously not full equipment quite, but we sort of ordered loads of plastic versions. So the delight of saying to a student, I'm not just going to ask you which you think is best, I'm going to get you to make a prediction, and then we're going to do a full-blown experiment to test it. And even if it's just checking the temperature of waters that they do to start with, or the first time they light a Bunsen burner, they're so excited because if you're then asking them about how things work, they know, and you can say, well, how does it work? Because they've tried it. So my favorite thing to do is to get out equipment to illustrate, but also to give them a chance to investigate as well, sort of pose an idea to them of, if they've got a question, what would happen if I do this? Assuming it's safe, my usual answer is, why don't you try it and see what happens? And it's great to see them take it a little bit beyond the scope of what they need to know, because yes, they have to know X, Y, and Z for an exam, but actually I'd rather they go out with intellectual curiosity. I'd rather they learn those kind of skills, and rather than just focusing on what they need to know for a test.
I've got to share some of our values with you. We have 4 values, which is be human, be creative, collaborate, and be hungry. But under be hungry, we have 5 principles, and one of those is push your boundaries and just start. It's that, I think that's just it's just encouraging that experimental mindset and just trying stuff and forming a hypothesis, I just think is so important. And so much of this gets lost, because I think this is where sort of science and creativity starts to meet, and you can start to, it's not just for science, it's for life and trying stuff out. And I think that was one of my, I have a little bit of shtick around this. I sometimes refer to the tyranny of science, because there is a massive scientific bias to the world that we live in. And it's like, well, if you can't prove it, it's not. And it's like, well, no, that's not what it's about, because new ideas can come from anywhere. And as we have learned, and as we learned all so often, they can come from the most sort of unusual places where that inspiration strikes, and you can solve a problem. But I think just encouraging experiments and, practical stuff, hands-on stuff, it feels like so much of that gets taken away, and you're not encouraged to do it. You're just kind of, it's a very linear pattern. And in fact, we're living in an age now where machines can do all the linear stuff, and what we need to be learning to do is to think differently and to see things differently. And you can only really do that if you have been encouraged to be curious, if you have been encouraged to experiment and play around with stuff, obviously in a safe way.
In a safe way, yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I agree as well with this sort of the idea of a science bias a little bit as well, in terms of there seems to be quite a lot of priority put on the sciences, and I obviously love that. I love STEM subjects, but STEM subjects don't work without the other subjects as well. They have a name STEM because they're not everything else. Sometimes we get STEAM, we throw in the arts as well because it bonds so well, but the skills that you learn in any subject can transfer to another subject, and the best thing you can do is to put those skills together and use them. So skills that you learn in writing an essay in history and researching and analysing text transfer to science, but things you learn being artistic and creative in other lessons transfer to science just as well. There might be a right answer in an exam mathematically or as a term, but that doesn't mean that it's the only answer. It means that there could be more that we don't understand. Look back I remember being at school and being told Pluto's not a planet anymore. So science isn't definite and forever. It's the best interpretation that we have of things now, and we need to make sure, you're right, we don't lose the human aspect to it and the creativity that comes with being human rather than being a computer.
And I really liked what you were saying about what you can learn from all those different subjects, because often, we forget that you can do that as sort of as an individual. It's always that the value of that sort of, well, the ultimate form is the polymath, the person that has a lot of a very broad and deep knowledge of subjects. But that's something else that we really value as well, and we talk about, is that cognitive diversity. It is being able to transfer that idea from that topic in that area and transfer it somewhere else. And I liked what you were saying about history, because when I speak with historians, the discipline that they learn is that triangulation. It's being able to take different facts. What did the experts say? What did the desk research and the diaries say? And what do we know from other fields during that period? What was the temperature like? What was it? And I think that's when the story becomes whole. And sometimes I just don't think there's enough of that interdisciplinary, or it's just not accepted enough. There isn't enough cognitive diversity actually in organizations, in workplaces and things like that. And you forget it's probably school where we are exposed to all of those things, but quickly we are then asked to specialize and forget all of that stuff and start thinking in straight lines again,
which is a shame, because there's just, school puts everything together. You've got all the different subjects, you combine and you jump from one subject to another, you throw in the extracurricular, the sport and the arts, everything else as well. It creates such a well-rounded or a diverse mix. It is a shame that going out into daily life, people don't always get the opportunity to explore that in their jobs and roles.
So if you were to design a school from scratch, here we go, we're going to go off on one now. Where would you begin, and how would you design a school system differently if you had your way?
Oh gosh, I think the most important thing first is to think away from the building and the infrastructure and think about what kind of a community you want to build, and making sure that whilst you build in time for the lessons and education, you also build some time into that for, sort of being a human, skills and practicing things like, can you hold a real life debate? Can you stand up and do some public speaking? Do you feel self-confident enough to share your opinions or to be yourself? And I think it's school. You're supposed to be learning, but learning isn't just about facts, figures, and how to do particular things for subjects. It's all sorts of different creative skills. So for me, I think the best school would mash together the sort of your standard education of subjects and life skills.
Yeah, that's certainly missing. I had a remarkable conversation about a year ago. I had to go to Germany. I had to fly to Switzerland and go by car, and I think I had about an hour and a half journey to where I needed to go. It's the fastest way to get to this location. And the chap driving the car had spent his entire career as a Steiner teacher. And I had the most remarkable conversation with him about the school that he was running, and and some of the things that you were mentioning there just triggered that a few memories from that conversation, because it was a more balanced. There were other things that were very important, and it was about the quality of those experiences as well. It wasn't just going through the motions; it was actually spending time doing things and being very thoughtful about those things you're doing as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate with the place I'm at that I can get some of that into the school. I'm one of the things, part of my role is in charge of a subject called Aspire, and it includes sort of public speaking, debating. They also do one-off lessons on things like sign language, and we look at different awareness of things. So actually, it's nice to have that opportunity, but I realise that that's not something that's kind of widely out there, because rightly so, teachers are incredibly busy trying to get through the curriculum that's put in front of them to get students to the grades that they're going to be held to, and it's difficult to find the time to fit those things in. So I'm forever grateful that I've been given the opportunity to add some of those skills into the daily school life.
One of the things that I think about a lot is or I say, but now this is where I might have to update how I think. I do sometimes feel that creativity is almost taught out of us, and it sounds like you're trying to put that back in, because creativity it's not really taught. They're sort of, like you said, they're the arts, and you get to do. I mean, what falls under arts these days?
I'd probably include art. Well, we have our art subject with sort of painting and sculpting and things. I'd also throw possibly some aspects of design and technology in there, and we also have drama, I suppose, would all fall into that category.
But nothing necessarily focuses on the actual, the creative process. And I think that's the piece. I mean, I talk to a lot of people who have had to make it up themselves, and there are lots of recurring themes. However they describe it, actually the activities that they're going through, whether that is going out and looking for information or getting feedback from people that they trust, not to ridicule them, but to kind of, when certainly when it's early ideas that they're playing with and getting that feedback. These are lots of similar themes, but often I think what subject, maybe it is actually in the sciences, it's hidden somewhere where we wouldn't think of looking for a creative process, but maybe the experimentation is the creative bit, and I've been overlooking that. It's just got me thinking about it now.
I'm glad it has, though. I agree. It's when people think of the sciences, you think of, there's a right and a wrong answer, but there had to be a significant creative process to get to that point. There's the amount of times where we'll be teaching something and I'll think, who on earth decided to try and find that out as the answer? Why do we know this as humans? At some point, I was fascinated about who worked out that we could drink the milk from a cow? Who worked out that there was, who sort of thought, what on earth are those things up in the sky? I'm going to build a device that looks at them. There's an amazing amount of creativity behind science that sometimes we can get so focused on learning what's already been discovered and facts and figures that we don't appreciate the creativity and the sort of out of the box thinking that had to go into finding those discoveries.
Well, I think that's often what is forgotten. We glorify the technology without necessarily understanding what was the genesis of that idea, and at the root of all it is often human ingenuity. I haven't heard of alien intervention yet, so it must be some form of human ingenuity.
Human error as well. This idea that getting things wrong is a good thing, and that's so incredibly difficult to teach students, that actually you've made a mistake, that's brilliant, you've learnt something new from it. And the idea that they see scientists and think, they knew everything, Einstein was so clever and all these scientists were fantastic, but they didn't know didn't know everything, and actually they probably had quite a lot of mistakes before they sort of hit the nail on the head and discovered something.
And particularly with having Google now, you do think you know everything. But that's what I've been learning. There are sources for places you can find stuff that's not on Google, and I think it's from conversations like this.
Yes, I would agree. I think you can't get human interaction no matter how many books and articles you read, and everything, online is filtered, it's edited to make it perfect, but it's those imperfections that are sometimes the most magical.
I think I've probably shared this story before, but I remember once going to Faber and Faber, the publishers' offices in London, and on their top floor they had this amazing, it was a big Perspex case, and it must have been 5 meters, maybe a little bigger. And in this case was almost the creative documentation of William Golding's Lord of the Flies. Oh, yeah. From his first letter to the publisher, which was just, sort of ridiculous idea, to him persevering with the manuscript and sending it to somebody else who, there's something in that, and the title didn't even emerge, The Lord of the Flies, until about 2/3 of the way along this cabinet. And so often we are led to believe there is this work of alone genius, and it's sort of this work of perfection that just gets delivered, and this beam of light comes down to sort of celebrate its kind of arrival in the world, and yet it's not. It's this long, painful process of rejection and rude letters and everything else that goes with it, and again, I think that is a very beautiful thing, and that is the process, the iterative process that we go through and have to take inspiration from to create a book like The Lord of the Flies, which is a great book.
Oh, absolutely. It must have been quite fascinating just to see that and try and sort of empathize and put yourself in the shoes of thinking, oh my goodness, what must they have been going through, thinking this is never going to work, to the elation of it achieving just the wonders that it has.
So what do you recommend to the children for extracurricular stuff? What if they are love working with being in your classroom and enjoying your class? Are there other things? Do you point them to links? I'm secretly asking for myself now. What are the places that you go to for inspiration? Are there any links that you share with them, or things that they, for those that are hungry to learn more? Where do you point them?
Oh, goodness. Oh, trying to think through if I've got any sort of secrets up my sleeve. We've got all the standard links of if they're struggling with homework, but they're not the same sort of thing. I think it's always a sort of a brave but careful thing to recommend that they go and do some research and watch some sort of things online to try and do some research. And if they're feeling comfortable enough, I'm always terrified about saying, actually, if you're really interested in that, why don't you go and test it out at home? Because I'm terrified I'm going to get a parent saying, why on earth have you told my child to do this? But sometimes it is good to see them sort of trying ideas out. And I think there isn't a sort of a secret link. I wish I did. I wish I had somewhere where I could say, actually, students, off you go and do this. I think the biggest thing we've done is sort of trying to introduce that creative thinking competition and try to show them that it's a question that could sort of bring in your experience from any different subject and things like that, and just encourage them to appreciate that there is no such thing as getting something completely wrong, that if a student gives a wrong answer, I never like to say, no, that's not right. I'm always thinking, actually, what does that lead to? What can that connect to? So, and I'm always trying to say to them, set them challenges. If I think actually they're interested in something, I might ask them a question. And even if I know the answer, just sort of say, can you go and try and find this out? Because then hopefully they can go away and try and learn a little bit more about something that they're interested in, hopefully expand their creativity.
Yeah, I often talk about there is a point you get to where you're it's learning to learn, actually. And it's that, and it's being able to go off and have that initiative to sort of ask the first question and then ask a better question and keep going. One of the reasons I was asking is because we've spent a lot of time thinking about that. And so, well, where do you go? And this is one of the things that we developed was an introduction to creative intelligence. So how to develop your creative intelligence, and it was an introduction. It's a self-directed course. Now, that is free to members of the Sense Network. If you join the Sense Network, you can get that. But I was thinking you have to be over 18 to join the network where it is. So one of the things I was thinking about was maybe we should design one for schools.
Yes, that would be fantastic.
Well, because you get to I've reached the point, I think, where you start to think it's my civic duty now to start sharing what we've learned, and how can we take the benefit of what we've learned over 20 plus years and spread that with more people so they can have the joy that we have of learning new things and getting challenged and meeting interesting people and generally expanding our minds. And I know not everyone is into that, actually. Some people just want to stop and go, right, I know enough. I don't need any more things in my life. But fortunately, I'm surrounded by people who do enjoy doing that. So maybe that is something we could talk about a bit further.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I think it would open doors both ways as well, because I'm constantly amazed by the things that students think of that I never would have thought of. And I think you're right. It's that idea of either creativity is taught out of us, or even if we try not to, there's an element of sort of growing up and thinking, actually, this is a thing that works, trying to think of things that are more to, as an adult, that are outside of the box, probably aren't to lots of children, and they'll come up with all sorts of things that even I didn't think of. And so the idea of sort of teaching them how they can expand their creativity, hopefully we can learn back from them as well. I think lots of people sort of sleep on the younger generation and think, we can help them, which is brilliant, we should, but actually in some respects they can help us too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, maybe one of the questions I always ask is there anything that the Sense Network can help with? But I'm actually thinking on this occasion, well, maybe you could help us figure out how we could adapt the course that we have got. And I mean, it might just be fine as it is, but it would be certainly worth, considering that you are the world creative thinking champion, secretly looking for your endorsement on this. But in fact, maybe we should do a meetup in the network, and those people who are interested in designing things for children, or think that's a worthy cause, maybe we could do a meetup off the back of that and explore it a little bit further.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Or if there's any sort of, if there are members of the Sense Network that have links to education or not education, but working with children, there's lots of other roles within schools and outside of schools where they come into contact with and work with children sort of professionally. It would be fascinating to get their input as well of what have they experienced, or perhaps look at what you have already for adults and think where would we be able to make some good tweaks to make it more sort of under 18 friendly.
Well, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you too. I've had a fascinating time. It's wonderful. I'm going to go off with so many thoughts in my head now.
Well, actually, maybe it was asking questions to a teacher for once, rather than teachers asking me lots of questions. Well, thank you so much, Emily. I look forward to speaking with you again some point in the future.
Thank you too, Jeremy. I do too, and absolutely love what you're doing at the Sense Network. I'm so excited for this idea, and just to, if I can be any help at all with anyone else's ideas, I would love to collaborate on as many things as possible, because I agree with you, the more people that get together and share ideas, the more we can learn from each other just as humans. Yeah, let's not forget that. Be human, be kind. Thank you for listening to Extreme Perspectives, brought to you by Sense Worldwide. We'd love you to join this conversation using the hashtag Extreme Perspectives. If you enjoyed it, leave us a review. The Sense Network collaborates with many of the world's most innovative companies to help them be more innovative. Join us at thesensenetwork.com or get in touch via email hello@senseworldwide.com.